On Decentraland today, Mark Zuckerberg admits to censoring data on Facebook. The big question is, why did he do it? And is anybody even on Facebook anymore?
This is Decentraland, distilling the crypto news you need to know and why.
All right, what's up, everybody? This is Decentraland, your weekly crypto and news report, macro, runes, ordinals, everything. I am Blue Toshi, and my co-host and childhood chum, Disco.
Aloha. It's, every week we we do a little prep and we see what we're going to do. And I just say, I feel like a chef this week with the mise en place ready to go and a lot of good ingredients. And I'm ready to cook up a great show. It's a very fertile environment.
Wow. Did you have all those metaphors planned? So now we're a cooking show. We're chefs. We're cooking content.
Mise en place is always the wife is a chef and she's taught me about mise en place and things like that, and it's very exciting. And I feel as if we have all the ingredients at the ready, and it's going to be a dynamite thing that comes out of it for sure. So very pumped for the show.
I've got to ask. I don't even know what you're talking. What is mise en place? Is that a word?
Yeah, it's like a term for having all the ingredients in a restaurant prepped so that you can just pull out of whichever bowl, whatever you decide to create or whatever you're working for. So it's basically the output of the prep work so that the kitchen is ready to roll.
Oh, interesting. So mise en place?
Yes, I believe it's a French term.
So just so everyone knows, on this show, Disco and I both wear multiple hats and do multiple roles, but the Disco is in charge of mise en place, getting the kitchen ready and getting the show ready with most of the topics, and we're reading everything and making stories too, I think, which is super cool, and really digging up stories and finding what's out there. So Disco, appreciate you doing that, and this show will not disappoint. There's cool stuff going on. We're not going to talk today as much macro, which is kind of even a relief for us. Yeah. There's not as many stories there. Even politically, there's not as many stories. But God, on the censorship front and what's going on, there's tons of stories. And you kind of wonder, Disco, as we get into this, are a lot of these related?
They feel as if, we've talked about the basket weaving, and it seems as if there's a large basket of themes this week, or a greater basket that all kind of ties into this. Not necessarily is this real, but there's really nuance behind almost all these stories that we're going to talk about, and they come from these greater issues. And it's been kind of a perfect lineage of time that we had the conversation with Eric that really kind of, baited the hook for me to start looking at things from a slightly different lens and perspective. And, right there front and center, you can see one of the biggest stories this week. And I'm just going to say my take on it essentially is this story should be way bigger. So my question is, why isn't this story getting reported on more? And what does that then kind of lead you to think? It's like you would have thought that this would have been across all the outlets, right, and everything, but it looks like it got a little buried, to be honest.
So here's what happened for those who've been under a rock. Mark Zuckerberg sent a letter to the Honorable Jim Jordan, Chairman, Committee of the Judiciary, United States House of Representatives, and a Republican. Mark Zuckerberg admitted to censoring information, I believe not only about Hunter Biden's laptop, but also about COVID, correct? Or was COVID the speculation based on this?
No, it's in the letter. There's a quote that says certain COVID-19 content, including humor and satire.
Right. So you can't even, and think about that.
You can't be funny.
You can't even joke about it. Right. So that censorship, you and I grew up with three channels, ABC, NBC, CBS, and then when we were 12, we got Fox and The Simpsons, and that was just a local. That was channel 32, WFLD. But now, the social networks were kind of a free for all for a while. But I think the government definitely got its talons and hooks in there. And the concern for Disco and I is just censorship and what's going on here. So Mark Zuckerberg writes this letter, Disco, to the
what prompted that,
right, exactly. So you wouldn't just be like, you know, like you
I'm
wouldn't
gonna.
wake up
Where's
one
my?
morning.
You know,
I'm feeling
it may-
guilty this morning. I'm just going to write a letter and tell the Congress that we've been censoring information forever. Like, so you got to figure he had to do it. The best theory I've seen, and we could certainly talk about others, because, Disco, he and his wife, I think it's called like the Zuckerberg Foundation, they donated. Initiative, thank you. They donated $400 million to fair polling and voting, which seems like it's a very good thing,
Yeah.
but they said they're going to pull that. So a lot of people speculated that he sees where the tide is going and siding with Trump, but I don't think that's the best theory. I think it's more nuanced than that.
Yeah, I think that's an easy way to do it. I think that one of the things that's fascinating to me is how the White House is responding, and kind of their verbiage. And one thing, we believe tech companies and other private actors should take into account the effects their actions have on the American people while making independent choices about the information they present. Like, what a bunch of gobbledygook. Like, I really don't know what you're saying, except like, hey, you got to do what we think's right. And, where does that lead us? And again, with the algorithms and the news feeds that people are being fed, like, what's the line? Like, how can they step in and say that? And satire is art, and it's one of the most like
comedy and satire.
significant, like that's one of the most vital and conversation starting and thought starting, pieces of art. I'm wrong with that, but forms of art. And to have that be, oh, it's too satirical. It's like, what does that mean? It was too on point, or it was too accurate, or it would lead people to, ponder deeper questions and go down different roads. Like, the verbiage in this communication, like I could spend a lot of time kind of trying to analyze just the word choice, because it's not, just as you were saying, it's not like, Zuck woke up in Hawaii this morning or however many mornings ago. It's like, where's my quill? I'm going to write this letter to Jim Jordan. I felt like I figured that out on my surf. It's like, no, dude, like what's going on there? And I don't know. So just a lot to consider.
Could you just read again real quick? What did the White House say, or at least the salient point? Like, it sounds like you're saying it was just mix mash gobble. Are they justifying?
Listen, White House said in a statement that, quote, when confronted with the deadly pandemic, this administration encouraged responsible actions to protect public health and safety. Our position has been clear and consistent. We believe tech companies and other private actors should take into account the effects their actions have on the American people while making independent choices about the information they present.
Yeah, so basically they're justifying their censorship. And,
that's straight up what it is.
Right. And the White House has I guess there's a point somewhere, like if there is huge misinformation spreading, and let's say the pandemic wasn't killing people and people were, or it was, and people were saying it wasn't or something, like I could see their argument, but they were flat out wrong here. They censored information that was correct in a lot of these aspects in COVID, and to have different voices is what allows the people to make an informed choice. So it's really disappointing. And it just doesn't seem like so Zuckerberg's above the law. Like, I mean,
well, let me ask you this. Like, so does that mean that, sketch comedy, like you can't go after political topics if it's satirical? Like, that's where I just think it's so out of line. Like, you're basically trying to, squash people's artistic or creative expression and reaction to things that are happening in the world. And if you don't have the ability to comment and to create off of what you're, what's hitting you or what you're living through, then what are we doing? I think it's so huge. And I'm just so blown away that it hasn't had the life in the media cycle that I think it really deserved.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that feels like groupthink, and in this case they suppress that, and I guess the Hunter laptop, which in Democratic circles I know got written off very quickly, like, oh, that's just that, kind of like using Trump's fake news on the Democrats side, like, oh, fake news. I think it was really close to the election, so they're like, we just have to buy time, and just both sides not listening to each other, and again, we citizens having to figure out what's real and what's not, and trying to put the pieces together can be very exhausting. But, I hinted before that, Zuckerberg and so did Disco, that he's not just going to come out and do this. And I don't think it's because he's now going to side with Trump. They're like, yeah, he's going to side with the winning side. Like, I don't think so. Like, I suspect he and his wife are still probably Democrats at their core. What I think is that there's a much bigger story from either internal people or whistleblowers or leakers who are going to blow this wide open. So he front ran this with this weak letter to Jim Jordan that just raises 100 more questions. So I think hopefully this doesn't stop what information is going to come out, but I suspect we have not seen the end of this news story.
Yeah, I mean, we should be obviously asking about, all the other media that we were absorbing during that time, and did they respond the same way to said pressure? So basically you get down to the point of, for however many years or whatever was going on, like what in that we were consumed or not allowed to consume was blocked, and by whom. And it certainly doesn't seem to me like it would be just a Meta or Facebook situation. And if they're having those conversations and quote, repeatedly pressuring Facebook for months to do this, what else have we, where else did they get to, and where else did that influence lie, and where does it lie to this day? Like we talk about different stories, and I mentioned it probably to you because my circle's small, but when you really think about it, it's like you barely ever hear anything about the assassination attempt, and that was a scant, like 7 weeks ago, less than 2 months ago. And you had the presidential, up there. They're not even really talking about, how it's just such an incredible moment. I know Trump's, using part of the suit, and we can talk about that at some point if you want to get into it with the trading cards, but just think of how freaking surreal, and just think of what that kind of represents in terms of the media's decision to put the foot on the scale to kind of weigh certain stories and to kind of have others go away. And I just can't believe how quickly that's kind of just been removed from the consciousness.
Well, absolutely. And I think you hinted at it in your monologue right there, but what is this still happening? Like, of course it is. Yeah. Like, I don't go on Facebook a ton. I have to go on just for a couple groups that I do sports in, which I'll probably actually reveal later, in curling to get subs. So that's the only time I ever go on there. And now they just post like TikTok like videos to kind of suck you in. But information on there like it basically it goes like birth, death, like wedding, then like, but who knows how much they're censoring the middle. And obviously people listening here, we're not on Facebook a lot, at least I hope you're not, or Instagram, but it just, that's such a big platform. He has, I haven't checked in years, but he has over 1 billion or 1.5 billion or like just so many users. It's so much bigger than the other platforms. And it's, the censorship is just horrible. So it's not a good look, but I hope more of the story comes out, and I hope he is not above the law and people like him get in trouble. But I guess if he's saying it comes from the White House, well, there's your partner, there's your exoneration. So it's just like, there's different sets of rules for different classes of people. And I think we in the middle, like we just regular citizenry who aren't multi-billionaires, like it's a shame. And it's disappointing. Like this censorship, this is America. This is a censorship-free zone. Obviously, we can't be harming and hurting people, and there are some limitations to that, but this is just ridiculous.
Yeah, and you have to look at like just the representation of the breakdown of trust, because you're being served stories based on your interests. We all understand kind of the algorithmic side of things and everything. But if you go back to actually, the Chicago market kind of had 4 stations to begin with because GN was always in the mix. So they had that. And then, 32 came in after that. But you always felt that there was at least, you were getting news that was true. And I know we're going to go back to, hey, Walter Cronkite used to say this or that, but if you're going and you're absorbing something and something's being omitted, I think this omission is probably the biggest point in the censorship, right? It's like something ceased to exist. It won't be allowed to breathe and to, be exposed or shared or anything. And I think that's the crux of it that just really scares the crap out of me and makes me question almost everything I get, and makes me really proud and excited about being part of independent media. And I think there should be a big move towards independent media moving forward. I think this is a perfect example of that. I can tell anybody who's exposed to this show right now, like, the show's our thoughts, and we try to filter through things and come out with a critical perspective of everything, and we're not shilling one side or the other necessarily, but it's genuine, and we're not omitting things because it's not convenient for us to talk about. And I think that that's the crux of the issue that really scares me.
Yeah, 100%. I think I disagree with you only on one thing. I think that a lot of this censorship back in the day when there was only 3, 5, 10 channels or whatever, right, I think it was way more than you think it is, because certain things would just be muted or not covered. And I think that's part of the awakening of the people with COVID, I think, is the main catalyst. Like, I think a lot of people saw it before that, but I think a lot more people are waking up just to see, like, I'm not ringing full conspiracy bells, but just a lot of information that we've been receiving or not receiving has been completely censored. And now we're seeing it in real time. I'd be curious if a lot of our normie friends or people on Facebook, like, does this bother them? Are they up in arms? Like, sometimes I think, like, a lot of people, what did Eric Voorhees say to us a couple of weeks ago? That you can't, like, if you want to sell a product and your main feature is privacy, unfortunately, I care, but other people don't care. Like, if you and I are in a room in my house and we're having a private conversation about all the boils on my feet or whatever, like, I don't, but that doesn't deserve to be public knowledge, right? So online in chat rooms or in end-to-end encrypted chat, do we get to have those same privacies? I would argue yes, 100%. Yeah, right?
Yeah, but as I say, like, my initial take was, I think this story should be bigger. And I talked to a couple people in my circle yesterday, and nobody cared. Nobody even saw it, and nobody really even had anything to say about it, where I thought it was going to be like a kickoff to a big conversation. So it's weird how it's muted. Yeah,
absolutely. So
and then
go ahead, Disco.
No, I was just going to say, like, the whole theme of the week, and it's not like a pre-baked theme or whatever, but if we want to talk about, another story that's, you got to look at very critically as well, it's what's going on in France right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's switch right to Pavel Durov from Telegram was arrested. So he is I believe he was a citizen of Russia. Then he is one of these billionaire guys. I guess every year, like 8 to 10 people who have enough money can pay to be a citizen of other countries. So he was a French citizen. It is rumored that he knew that he was going to be arrested. And that really triggered on X with Elon and a whole bunch of people, the whole freedom of speech for Telegram. And that's kind of been the main narrative, but that's not the only narrative. And going deeper, I don't know any more obviously than anyone else, but there's another narrative going on, Disco, that's more that he's tied with some pretty bad organizations, and there's way more going on here, and he's broken, besides Telegram and the freedom of speech issue, he's broken a lot of laws. So I don't know, but I'm just throwing all the pieces out there because I suspect this one's way trickier than just let's grab this and run with the freedom of speech, and that's that.
Which is telling in itself, right? Like, that's kind of the crux of what we're kind of dancing around or addressing in this show. It's like, yeah, your knee jerk is going to be like, of course, free speech. Oh, this is terrible. Free them right now. And you'll, see the hashtag free, start spreading immediately. And, you have Macron, saying that it's not political, there's stuff to this. So, you kind of want to see how it shakes out. I think that like in real time, I think like they're in court now, or he went to court today. So we'll see how that happens. But you're also then looking at the geopolitical side of France and Russia,
Right.
and how that's all like, you're looking at that side of it, which may not be as simple as, just, hey, let's jump on this train right here, because there's just so many different angles to it. And, it could be part of their support of, being more hawkish on the Ukrainian front and how that ties in. So it's just, there's so many different angles to all these stories. And I think the short lesson is you've got to kind of let things develop and look at all sides, because it's really easy to jump in the river and kind of float down right away off of your initial, kind of feeding or take. But I think these things have to take time to kind of bake out and really understand what the final outcome is going to be.
Yeah, well, they have to take time and bake out, but also, depending on how much you care about the story, you also have to sift through stuff, because I think the longer things go on, because this is more a European thing, like you said, France and Russia, there's so much going on. Who knows? Could it be spy stuff or way beyond? Like, I know there's a lot of accusations that Telegram, it's not encrypted at all. So people are like, what are you even talking about? And that data has been sold to all sorts of undercover and shady actors anyway. So who knows if the real story will come out, but I suspect it's somewhere in the middle of both sides that we'll hear. It's not that, I guess, as we get up to the 2024 election, like this absolutism that people, it's like, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, I'm only this, I'm pro-choice, I'm pro, like, a lot of these issues totally matter, but there's always so much more nuance in the middle that I feel like the short attention spans of modern day society, like you said, with the Trump shooting, like it's been 7 weeks, and obviously it's being used on his presidential ticket, but otherwise it's not really in any news stories. So is that true then, that mainstream media is just like blocking and not saying that stuff? So it's amazing how our current social media and ours and our children's attention spans get shorter and shorter. And it's a little disheartening, but like Disco said, support independent media, support this show. If you have a long commute, follow us and like us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. And let us know in the comments, if you go into this video in X, and you post in the chat in there, it's different from the tweet chat, it's the actual chat in X. We can post your PFP and your question up here, and we can answer any questions. So just wanted to let everyone know that. So stay tuned for this one. Is there more?
Yeah. Well, just really quick on something that you touched on that got me going a little bit, is we're also now going through this annoying process, and I'll just say it's annoying, and it's election tide, where any piece of news then seems to get kind of painted, oh, well, that's good for this candidate, or you can't have this news story and vote for da da da. Like everything is now quickly co-opted into this is another reason why I'm right about who I'm voting for. So it's just, I can't wait for it to be behind us, just because it's, we knew it was going to get really kind of crazy just in this sort of talk. And you wonder, I've seen people mention this, like what's going to happen to a poly market or something like that when the election stories aren't there to go with and stuff like. So it's just interesting, but we are in this just crazy time. And I think these stories that we're talking about are incredibly important, and they're incredibly nuanced. And I think that these should be the things that are covered, as opposed to the scroll and the ticker you're going to see on mainstream media. So it's just, stay tuned. It's just a fascinating time to kind of dig in. I'm holding myself much more accountable to my reactions to inputs than I had before. I used to maybe just kind of take them at face value and be like, I don't really care this or that, but I'm trying to, do that, flip the egg and cook the other side a little bit.
Flip the egg. I like that. So are you a scrambled guy, or are you like a sunny side?
No. My preference is poached with a little hollandaise, of course, because I do enjoy a nice. That's where my bread is buttered, my friend.
I think my son actually, when he was young, I don't know where he learned this. I think he liked poached egg. That's where you put them in half, and then they're like hard boiled almost, right?
Well, you can float them, and then, or you can. I mean, you can cheat and use like an egg poacher, which you have, like the little cups, and you put it in, and they go that way, and they kind of boil up. But you can also put them directly into the boiling water. But it's just a delight when you poke it, and then you got a little hollandaise, and you have the runniness. So we could have a show just on that in mise en place, believe me.
I'm sure we could have a show on that, and we would have an attendance of 0.
And a lot of people watch Cooking Network.
That is true. Yeah, we'll start throwing more cooking stuff in. So moving right along, this one is more on a personal note, and it's amazing how those first 2 stories tied together with Meta and what they're doing with censorship, and then Pavel Durov, and it's probably more complicated than you think. So I'm going to start with a personal route and then get more into the Ethereum side. But I sold my CryptoPunk last week. I think it actually sold the morning of our show disco last week. And it's kind of the end of an era for me. I think I held it for 2 years. And I got to say, like, I have no regrets. I definitely took a big loss on that, both huge loss in ETH, but also a pretty decent size loss when I have to convert that to US dollars. So at least I'll tax harvest, have some tax harvesting for that one. But I know you've been prodding me, and I've been thinking about it too. So it's good to get out. Like, are CryptoPunks worth buying? So I had it for a couple of years, and I met, I just want to preface this whole thing. There's a lot of cool CryptoPunks. There's a lot of cool things that they're doing. I met a lot of great people, not only hold CryptoPunks on the ETH side, but a lot of us who have migrated over to the Bitcoin side. And, but I listed it when, they were in the 20s. I think I listed at 35, and I kind of just walked away, and then it made a little run. CryptoPunks did, and they went back up to like a 30 floor, and mine's definitely a floor plus. You can see right there, nice purple glasses, the messy hair, the Van Dyke beard, or as Crown always called it, the shit eater, which
I can't unsee it now.
Which was funny, but once you hear it, you're like, oh, that just devalued it in my head. But I always liked this guy, and when I was younger, it kind of looked like me. So I did sell it, and it pumped a little. I probably would have pushed the price up a little to follow the pump as a not a mid, but
right,
an above in a floor plus, we'll call it, right? And it sold. And I got to say, I wasn't in a rush to sell, but there was also kind of a relief because over the years, I tried to get involved in the CryptoPunks community. And like I said, I made a lot of good friends that way. But, there's also a lot of things in the CryptoPunks community I didn't like. So I just wanted to share kind of the whole picture, the nuance for other people who, we obviously for the ETH chain, except for maybe Fidenzas and, some of the beautiful art from like Art Blocks, maybe some Def Beef stuff, like CryptoPunks are the known 10,000K collection crown jewel, right? And they represent ETH. They weren't on chain originally. They were kind of this weird hybrid where it pointed to a sheet. But then they came on chain in 2021, which I won't even buy art if it's not 100% on chain anymore. Thus why I've moved more to ordinals and Bitcoin. But I sold this because, well, many reasons. A couple of years ago in the Punk Discord, which used to be a pretty cool, active place, and there was a lot of good ideas. If you're going to get a CryptoPunk, this is what you need to know. There's a group in there, whether it's 5, 10, or 20 or 30 people who pretty much dominate it. Most of them have been CryptoPunk holders for a long time. They've known each other a long time, and they dominate, we're talking about censorship, but they kind of dominated the narrative in there. And there's one time there's a punk or a group in particular who used to front run other punks all the time. So if you bid on something and the price, like if there was a price out there, they wouldn't just snap it. Or if you bid on it, they were going to accept it. This person would front run the punk and then like literally reach out to the person who didn't get it and like resell it to them for like 5 ETH. So to me, like it was totally legitimate.
5 ETH extra.
Yeah. Or whatever it was. Maybe it was 1 or 2 or 4, whatever they could get away with. So in one sense, they're a coder, an entrepreneur, and that's that's an interesting thing, but it also leaves a crappy taste in my mouth. Now mine, when I bought it, did not get front run, but think about mentally, I'm like, oh, because I bid too high on it. And I probably did, because it looked like me. I probably, even at that market back then, I probably bid like 5 or 6 or 7 ETH more than I should, maybe even 10 ETH. So I wanted it, whatever. But that front running, I kind of called it out in the chat was talking about that, and some people were kind of chiming up, and I just said, like, I don't think it's a good thing for this group. Even though it's legal, you can totally do it. It doesn't leave a good taste in my mouth. And I got ridiculed so fast. And this was when I was a newer punk too. And people, like, it was pretty amazing. It was almost like the same person had 10 accounts, but 10 different accounts, including the one who did all the front running, just jumped in, ridiculed me, called me a Muppet, and called me all the, the things you don't want to hear when you're like an art and NFT collector. And, I took it, but it was kind of a shitty feeling. And I didn't love it. And early on, I'm like, why do I want to, like, whenever someone would go against the grain of what their beliefs were, they'd kind of circle the wagons, a group of them, and they would just attack people. And I'm like, this has nothing to do with the ethos of like decentralized on chain and like an independent group of kind of art collectors and crypto holders, where you come together and kind of like share great ideas. To me, the innovation and thinking had already, as my mom would always say, had congealed before, and it was dominated by certain voices. So like I said, most of the people were super nice, but there was a small group of OGs. They controlled the narrative, and right away I was like, well, I'm either consciously or subconsciously like, I'm not going to spend much time in here anymore.
Wow. Thank you for, sharing that, because it's interesting, because you always look, at least someone like myself who doesn't have, as much in the collection from kind of that aspirational perspective. And you look at, in my mind, it'd always be like, oh man, if I could, people are like, if I can get up to this point, if I could level up, if I could do this, you almost have this notion in your mind that the gates of Shangri-La are going to open, and you're going to be like, oh, now I have this, and all my new friends, and I can get so much alpha, and it's so fascinating, and we're doing such great things together. And it's kind of that promise of that last wave of the frothy, NFT days, where it was like, oh, but it can do this, and you get access to this, and it's like, so it's like all those different levels to it. And then to kind of hear that maybe it's not all, as rosy as you think it is once you get access to certain things, is really, mind changing. And you think about, how many of these, Discord groups or whatever that you get at, people are trying to get access to all the time. And you think about how they can have their own toxicity within it, regardless of kind of the foundational ethos that is behind it. You still can have, little aspects of infection, so to speak, that kind of dominate how things are going to happen and how you kind of fit in. And you're going like back to the high school lunchroom again, and you got to kind of earn your chops by fitting in a weird way, even though the project to me screams individuality and, a completely different sort of ethos. So to see that not necessarily manifest had to have been an interesting pill to swallow, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there was actually a guy who was an impassioned CryptoPunks holder, beautiful NFTs, and he actually created a whole new marketplace. And his whole point was basically to create it so that you couldn't have this front running. And, it's funny because a lot of people, I wasn't the only person who had voiced this over the years, how frustrating it was. But what they did then is they finally, Yuga or who the powers that be, finally overhauled. And I believe now it's they finally updated the website, at least partially, where front running is not as common and tougher. But, that was years ago. It took them years to do it. There was a lot of talk. The other big one was the artist in residence. And, I didn't necessarily, the art wasn't for me, the first resident. I think there was only 50 to 100 of them, but just the toxicity in there. And, maybe some of it was rightfully so, but there was a lot of personal attacks on the actual artist and how terrible it was. It was like, and like I said, the art wasn't for me, but I think this isn't a CryptoPunk warning. This is like all groups. Like, it's funny because we're in such a decentralized ethos. You nailed it. But the more you get into them, and the ones that have been around longer, it's almost, and especially these bigger ones, like you've got to play a certain role or kind of warm up. It's just like being a freshman in college again or whatever. And, you may get mocked and ridiculed if you stand up for ideas that you believe in. And I think it's naive to think that wouldn't happen, but at the same time, like it challenges the equation of how important is that social structure overall? Because I would argue, like, if I kept my CryptoPunk and you and I are traveling more and more to these conferences, like, especially if we go to some of the art shows, there's probably brunches and cool events like at Beeple's studio. Like, there's stuff that we would probably have fun, like meet a lot of great people and love. But, for that and for many other reasons, which we're going to get into more ETH now, I actually feel good about selling. Like I said, most of the people I met in CryptoPunks were awesome, but the whole front running was, to me, a bad taste in the mouth and certainly not something I want to stick with. But let's go to the bigger picture of ETH and one of the big reasons why I sold. I mean, so remember, we'll go one step up. Yuga owns CryptoPunks, right? It was Larva Labs. They made it. Those guys were very cutting edge. And then...
Okay, so that's what I wanted to understand. I don't think I understood. So Larva started it, and then how did Yuga get in? They just bought it?
Yeah, because the big problem for Larva is they made them, and they didn't want to give up the IP rights to the CryptoPunks, and the holders were like, F you. Like, this is a perfect collection to give us the IP rights. And really, in my opinion, like, the punchline is CryptoPunks should be CCO, period, the end. That's the only thing that's going to set them free that they should be. So Larva was not, remember, when they made this, there was no NFT marketplace. There was no royalties or commissions. So they got 0% commissions. Remember, they gave these things away for free. Okay. They did keep 1,000 of them. So I'm sure they made some good money, but I think these guys are artists and coders. They were ready to move on. Yuga was dominating with Bored Apes, then obviously Mutant Apes and all these. So Yuga bought it. And to Yuga's credit, the first thing they did was give, like, literally, the ink hadn't even dried on the deal. And they said all CryptoPunk holders have their IP rights. And the IP rights, they're written well. Yeah. I think they're similar to Azuki's. But they wrote it, they have them, and it was a very good step forward. But to me, like, I don't think anybody should own CryptoPunks, because CryptoPunks are tied in. Like, they tried to do this artist in residence, which you would think was a great idea, and it got so panned and the toxicity got so high so fast, and maybe from some OGs, maybe rightfully so. Like, maybe it was the wrong residence for the CryptoPunk style. I'm not going to comment on that, but it was toxic, right? So to me, Yuga obviously is not doing as well as it used to. The other side, they made a bloody fortune selling those deeds. It was probably the worst mint in the history in terms of gas fees and people getting screwed and overpaying for stuff, and then the market just tanking. Then they sold even more other deeds. Like, and the people at Yuga, I think they're great folks, and I'm sure they're nice, but they're trying their hardest to make this a company with high revenues. And the problem with Web3 and companies, like, when you're not the it thing, when you're not hot anymore, especially when you're trying to provide utility, you're screwed. You are absolutely screwed, because a lot of people, as I've said, and you've said in these last couple shows, newer entrants to NFTs and meme coins are going straight to Solana. Their numbers are double, triple Ethereum now monthly, thanks to CryptoSlam and their great charts. And then Bitcoin is a smaller marketplace, but a lot of diehard ETH folks, a lot of CryptoPunk holders, and a lot of big collection holders there came and kind of founded the collector and artist set in the ordinal space. And, I I guess I don't never want to say never, but I'm not leaving, you know, and I think my mindset is probably shared by a lot of other people. So, you know, you ladder from Yuga all the way up to Ethereum, and, you know, Ethereum's having problems. I mean, you check this out, dude.
Yeah.
Ethereum, this is probably the most eye-opening chart. So the average, you know, and credit, I don't listen to Bankless anymore. I don't like the show. I think they shill too much.
They're in a little hot water right now too.
Yeah, well, let's get to them in a second. But look, this
Yeah.
is the Ethereum, the 1 year snapshot of gas fees on Ethereum. So, you know, there's two arguments. High gas fees is not conducive to people wanting to transact because you're paying, you know, 100 GUI or 50 GUI. You're like, screw that. I'm not paying $14 to like mint a $3 NFT. Like, so there's that limitation, but now there's an even worse problem for stakers like me and for people who want to see the health of the system. A busy blockchain is a healthy blockchain, and gas fees right now are at like 4 GUI or 3 GUI. They're teeny. So if you look at all-time gas fees, they're just absolutely tiny.
And how do we factor L2 into it?
You know, L2s on Ethereum, I guess my theory is they were probably necessary. You know, I guess most of them roll back down into ETH for security, but bridging, as you and I've talked about, is a pain in the ass. Bridges have been hacked. Like, it's not a seamless process at all. I think the only ones, in my opinion, who've done a good job with L2s is probably Base, and they're a more recent success story. Obviously, Polygon with Polymarket, and they're changing their token, I believe, to Poly, are doing well, but you know, they've got some good wins there. But overall, the actual ETH base layer system, if gas is at 3 GUI, that screws us stakers, right?
That's
because ETH is inflationary.
What percent
again.
are you getting? Yeah.
Right. ETH is inflationary again because we rely some of that, and it's also for the inflationary, deflationary nature of ETH. If it's not being used, you're not burning ETH in the transactions. If you're not burning ETH in the transactions, it actually becomes an inflationary currency again, which, you know, is no good.
It's against everything which is against the whole, you know, theory over the last 2 or so years that was so, at least, you know, a year ago was kind of the no-brainer when you're looking at where to kind of park any sort of investment. It's like, well, on this, and it's going to be, you know, deflationary, and you can stake, you know, so all those, that whole narrative has just seemingly evaporated. And, you know, I know we kind of saw like Lido and, you know, all that stuff come in, and we really took hard looks at, you know, what would you do with staking? What's the best way to do it and everything. And it's kind of irrelevant if no one's using it and the gas prices are where they are, you know, like it doesn't, the whole kind of structure of that, the foundation of that whole concept gets kind of falls apart a little bit, right?
Well, absolutely. And then remember Eigenlayer, like that guy, how much they're, you know, it's just like the old BS tokenomics, like, hey, like they say the founders are only getting 10% for our treasury, but then you look at all the other parts of the pie and, you know, I don't know how much the Bankless guys are getting, but it's just, it was a total cash grab. It's ridiculous. Now staking on ETH is already like way less profitable, but now you've got this Eigenlayer on top of it. So a double stake, staking staked ETH, like that to me sounds like a house of cards. Like you're buying the top story, you know, like if your life depended on the Jenga block that you got to get, like give me the bottom one, give me the one that when everything falls, the bottom one's still just boringly sitting there, and you're buying like
quite secure.
You're buying that top Jenga block after a good like 13-minute game. You're like, wow, that thing doesn't look like it's going to stand much longer, you know? So We could go back to the Brady Bunch too, where I believe Jan's locket hit the house of cards and it fell in the gamble with Peter. But we won't go there today because most people probably don't even know what the Brady Bunch is. But
that was a very tense moment.
it was a very tense moment. Pork chops and applesauce. But I guess my final take as we ladder more into ETH is, I would definitely buy in to CryptoPunks again if CryptoPunks was CCO. I think Creative Commons Open for CryptoPunks is an absolute must for this collection to be eternal, OG, and forever. Otherwise, I think with ETH tanking right now, I may eat these words, but I've got plenty of other art I love to collect, and now this has freed me up to even buy more art. Yeah. But I suspect that CryptoPunks floor will go down. It will keep going down as long as the ETH chain and gas fees are low and the chain isn't doing that well. Now there's been a little spike in CryptoPunks right now, but unless there's a huge new use case on ETH, or if the ETH chain, like if Larry Fink says we're tokenizing everything here, or something to get the news cycle going that's actually legitimate and gets that ETH blockchain busy, I think ETH's in a little bit of trouble right now.
Wow. And one of the things with CryptoPunks, or what we're kind of seeing, is it's kind of like a cultural lag, right? And it's very, very hard to capture kind of the zeitgeist. I don't even know if I'm using the word right, but capture kind of the having your finger on the pulse of pop culture, and then be able to build out and execute after you kind of find out, oh, people are biting into this. And I think that that's what we're seeing right now with all of these kind of, I'll say, heritage ETH NFT, operations. And, you're seeing some with different amounts of success, and we're starting to see them come to life. But I think for what you're saying, just a straight transition to CCO is such a simple and seemingly obvious move that really would be the best way, instead of like, oh, wait till we build our, Punkverse and all these different things and all that stuff that then takes all this development time, and you still don't know if it's going to hit, and you don't know if it's going to be relevant by the time it's all built out. So we're just at an interesting time. You see, some of the different projects, you see Doodles doing some relatively interesting stuff. You see, there's a lot of talk on kind of the penguins and stuff like that. So seeing these things, actually execute on something, Azuki, XYZ, you're kind of waiting for this thing, and you didn't really have that sort of narrative on, oh, but CryptoPunks are building this and this is what's going to come. So when you look at not necessarily getting, a really vital community where you feel like, dude, I'm just so happy to be a part of this. This is my crew. And, you could be in those different projects. Like, that's very important. And I think that that's lacking. And I don't know, I haven't been in those, but I do feel on the Rune side and on the Bitcoin side, it feels like people are more receptive and open and patient to seeing something really come to life and letting it kind of build the right way. So it's almost like Bitcoin's experiencing an opportunity to learn from, I don't want to say the failures of other chains, but from kind of the timelines and the development of the other chains. And it's really interesting to see, starting to see new speculation about, oh, what could be done on Bitcoin and what could happen. And when I came in, at the top of the froth or whatever, it was all, oh, but all these things can happen with utility on the Ethereum. Everything's getting built there because you can do X, Y, or Z. And now we're starting to see, Casey can mention things, and, people will get into it and be like, oh, we kind of have that age of wonder again on Bitcoin of what's possible and where it can head and what's being built. And you're almost waiting, like almost anxiously awaiting just the next update on where things are headed. Yeah. And that's the spirit that's going to be very difficult to recapture, that kind of pioneering spirit of like, hey, dude, I'm excited because this, and this can come, and, follow Scribe, follow anyone. And you start seeing all these different, moments of wonder of what could be, being kind of cooked up in the kitchen, whereas you don't feel that. And it almost feels default like Ethereum and Optimism underneath it and everything are going, okay, we're going to use BizDev and we're going to go corporate, and we're going to, be like Sony build out on the Optimism stack, and we're going to have, Base with Coinbase, go through Optimism. And it's like that's good, I guess, if you want to be that sort of chain.
Right.
But I think that there's just a excitement now around kind of a rebirth, what could happen, quote, on the mother chain.
Yeah, that's a great point, Disco, bringing Bitcoin back into it. And, I will say RuneCoin, RSIC, and Dog Go to the Moon coin, Runestone, those created communities beyond single PFPs. So there's actually something in Runes, even though Runes, has blown up and isn't doing great right now. A lot of what RuneCoin and RuneDev said, there's promise of more building. And I believe, I think we're at the beginnings of that ecosystem fleshing out. But those two communities specifically, but other ones, Billy, Cat, and a lot of them have raised the bar and brought a lot of groups together. So maybe, even though they're fiefdoms and collections and stuff, maybe there's more that there's more that has brought us together too. So I didn't even consider that side of it. And you brought up Izuki and you brought up Doodles, and I think we'll talk about that more. Like, for me, CryptoPunks, like, obviously Yuga could lose if they just give up the IP rights. They probably have 600 punks left, so they would benefit there, I think, big time. But I don't think you can corral CryptoPunks. I think CCO is the only way to go. Obviously, I don't have Yuga's bottom line. They may be desperate right now, and if they gave up that, you can't CCO, even though those
it's out the gate.
Even though Moonbirds tried, which is also now owned by Yuga. So now they accumulated all the assets on ETH, the good ones and the crappy ones. So it's just a lot. So why don't you share with us as we wrap up this last 10 minutes, and I'm going to get Ski God set up.
Nice.
Let's just talk a little bit about Ethereum and Vitalik and what he's been posting as kind of the final blow for me wanting to get out of CryptoPunks and not look at ETH right now. But it's like ETH is struggling, and there's a lot of facets to this.
Yeah, there's so many different facets. Obviously, there was the news about the foundation and the budget and how that I think people kind of thought it was a bit of a sneaky move. Like, they didn't really alert people to it. And I think someone, kind of sleuthed and found it and was like, hey, wait, what's this? And they're like, oh, it's just standard operating procedure. So there's a lot of questions just about this $100 million, Ethereum Foundation budget. And I think that what my kind of thought is on it is Vitalik what's needed? Like, what do you need right now to be kind of the voice of a chain, right? And you look at Saylor and how he's operated from, he's had strong messaging, he's consistent, he is able to kind of capture the potential and what I was kind of alluding to with, the wonder of, oh yeah, this is a no-brainer, and made it very simple. Like, MicroStrategy, also his messaging is very microcentric as well, right, in terms of this is what it is. And I just wonder if kind of the messaging from the top of Ethereum is a little too esoteric and it kind of gets lost. And then you start seeing, easy fuddable things such as like $100 million budget for the foundation, leading to, well, what exactly is the foundation's purpose? How did that start? What's kind of the capabilities or the need for all these different things? So it's a very interesting time. And you have people like Bankless, for example, today is in the crosshairs a little bit, like people are like, oh,
before we get into the Bankless cross, because I do want to hear about that, Disco. So I do want to welcome, we're doing our show now kind of like live, like everyone gets to see in the studio. So the second part of our show, which will also be its own show, we brought one of my favorite people in the space and fellow Bitcoin shroom holder, Ski God. So what we did last week with Scribe, we kind of bring him to the end of the show. Ski God, welcome to the show. We're going to put you, don't worry, in the main screen once we get past the news cycle part, which is probably the next 10 minutes. But welcome to the show, and you're more than welcome to contribute or chime in on anywhere in the conversation. Like I said, we're kind of wrapping up on the Ethereum side. There's been, usually we spend a lot more time in macro, which we'll be talking about with you and trading and all that good stuff. You just had a great tweet the other day. But Ethereum, what's going on there with their $100 million budget, and Vitalik posting things that the main people in the ecosystem are like, well, he doesn't control everything. He's not Satoshi. He doesn't speak for all of us, So that was a long-winded way. Ski God, we'll have a more formal introduction, but welcome to the show, and we appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, guys. This is my first mic check. Does it work?
Like a charm.
You sound sexy.
Oh, baby. Let's go. How
It's
many
like
people
butter.
do you have bringing a mic like this to your show?
It's all set up for the drop at the end, right?
I was just gonna say those were mic drop. That's how old people drink tea, like Judge Smales' wife, and then that's mic drop fingers, right? Or that's that's like anyway. So yeah, welcome to the show. So Disco, you make great points with Ethereum. Like so the ETH Foundation gets $100 million budget. I guess the crappiest thing about it to me is like everything's on chain. People are so dumb. Like people discovered it and they're like, oh, it's just for this. And there's two arguments. One is like, dude, Vitalik and that team made frickin' Ethereum a multi-$100 billion asset. Like so much cool stuff has happened there. Like if they have a reserve and they're paying themselves 100 million, which sounds like a ton, but with paying salaries and stuff, like it probably goes fast. 100 million, it's a lot and a little, I guess, depending on who you ask, but it's not a ton. They're cashing out 100 million a year. So one could say they deserve it. And the other could say like, how decentralized is it if the foundation is still like cashing checks from Ethereum?
Yeah, again, I think it's optics too, right? As you were saying, it was like how they went about. If you did a release or whatever, and we're transparent, you're like, hey, this is what it is, but it's like someone kind of gotcha. Someone found it and it was a little gotcha game, and I just think they looked a little bit, they got caught doing something that isn't at its foundation necessarily negative, but it's just adding to the drumbeat of like, where are things going with this chain overall? And, you talk about decentralization, yet is there a need for leadership or a spokesperson, like who's carrying the torch right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Ski Guide, I know we'll get more to your story in a bit, but I know you came in from Solana and then traversed to Bitcoin. Was ETH ever like, is that even on your radar and in your ecosystem or not even?
Yeah, I mean, it was. I was in that kind of 2021, 2020 ETH Bitcoin. I don't even know what we want to call it these days, but yes, I basically felt like I was late to leave ETH as Solana was starting to get wrecked. I was late to leave ETH. Well, so I thought, right? It happens to be I ended up kind of being early, but yeah, it's a tough story, but I'll be honest with you. Like the more you guys talk about this as a trader, the more I'm like, this is starting to all culminate into this one last like capitulation, if you want to call it that, event for ETH, to where I feel like it'll be a clearing event of sentiment and they'll be fine. I don't hold ETH. I'm a Solana Bitcoin guy. I just think if ETH does well, Solana does better, but I have nothing against it. I just think that this is one of those things. It almost feels like a big tech company's CEO selling stock and everybody's like, oh my God, they're selling stock. Like you get out. And then 2 months later, the stock's at an all-time high and nobody gives a shit. Right. So it almost feels like all these things are culminating where Vitalik's even like calling people out or whatever. And all this terrible energy is coming towards ETH, even worse than the past few months, which have been really bad, to where I'm almost like, all right, dude, like if you see a point where everything catches a bit across crypto, like I could see ETH just having a fucking party for a little bit.
Interesting. I think one of my favorite things about you are your kind of contrarian takes. You're very good at taking the emotion out and be like, dude, when there's panic and blood, I'm holding money. Maybe I'll buy, maybe I won't, but I'm not letting the emotions of like, run, which honestly, if you don't have the discipline of a professional trader, most of us get FUD and FOMO brain hijacked. And I just love it. You're like, dude, runes, like we shit the bed on that thing. Like they'll be maybe fine eventually, but everybody quit pumping these bags. Like you're just wishful thinking. You're like,
shout out to the RSIC community.
Yeah, exactly. Which Disco and I are heavily a part of, but yeah, absolutely. So I guess we'll ask, like, Disco, do you want to share? If you can, I will. Like, what did Vitalik say? Because the big question is like, does his opinion matter in all this?
I'm not even sure what he said. And that's kind of more what I was getting at. It's like, who, who are we turning to for kind of that assurance right now? And so the messaging that has been coming out just appears to have been kind of mixed. So what stood out to you?
Well, the big one is he said staking, and I'm a staker. I've got 3 validators. And I used to remember play around with Lido and Rocket Pool and stuff to see if those were any good. And I got out of those pretty quick, because being your own validator is way better. But he basically said he wants to take the fees down for stakers, so make that kind of less important. And the other one that really ruffled a lot of feathers is in the DeFi space. He kind of shit a little bit in the DeFi space and kind of tried to downplay its importance. But this thing apparently was a draft. I don't know if it leaked or if he's just being more vocal, but I guess that with $100 million, like, there's so many forces at play right now. Maybe Ski God's right. It's just like, dude, when there's 20 stories against you, like, ETH is still the number 2 chain. Maybe Solana will surpass it. Maybe it won't. Solana obviously is way more centralized than ETH, but these stories all put together certainly don't make me want to hold a CryptoPunk anymore, which Ski God, right before you got on, I said sold, and kind of told my highs and lows from being a CryptoPunk holder and being a part of that community. But to me, it just, my focus is so much more on Bitcoin. I hold Solana bags, but ETH now, I'm like, at least I feel like I need to rebalance. Maybe not today, but soon.
Yeah, I think
oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, please. No, go.
Just on your point of the Vitalik thing, I want to give a shout out to the 1000X podcast. It's one of my favorite sneaky crypto podcasts to listen to, just because, like, it's 2 very, very well-versed kind of, they've been in the game for a long time in trading and TradFi. So it's I think it's run by Blockworks originally, but like, it's Jonah JVB _ XYZ, and then Avi Feldman, which you guys have probably heard of him before. But they were talking about this the other day, and they kind of covered like this idea that Vitalik was maybe stuck a little bit in the past, where he's focused too much on, like, he thinks that kind of it's too focused on financialization, speculation, and yield stacking and all this, and he wants it to bridge out to something greater, and that's not like enough of a use case. And Jonah's point, who's been in TradFi and worked in commodity shops in some of the biggest funds in the world, he's basically like, bro, that is TradFi. It's a massive use case, and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars are in this circular vacuum in different things. Like, that's enough. You don't need it to be what Solana is becoming, or you don't need it to like cover everybody's hopes and wants for everything in the world to be decentralized. And I thought that was like even me, who loves like banging the anti-ETH drum just for fun, like, I was like, yeah, like, if that's gonna be their lane, then like be the best lane there. And I was like, that's people want yield, people want to earn money, like, why not? That seems like enough.
You want to go Disco? I know you had a couple things to say.
No, I'm processing it. It kind of goes to, I think what Ski God's pointed out in my head, which is helpful, is it doesn't always have to just be, zero sum one winner. You know what I mean? And if we're really talking about adoption, and we've talked for, months and months about all these signs of institutions getting involved and all that stuff. It's not like, oh, we better move quickly. I think we get emotional and a little, kind of trigger happy on jumping around, like, oh, I better do that. Oh, he's dead, and I think just having that perspective on, there's room in the sandbox for quite a few different things to go up and do well is helpful, because you do get, it's kind of what we talked about in the very, very beginning of the show, right? Like, you have to work on your filter and create and critically analyze everything you're being served and read and fed. And in doing that, like, yeah, it's very easy for, me to hang up this and be like, I'm dumping my ETH. And then it's like, I don't know, dude, ETH could be all right. So it's very helpful to hear that. And I'm really glad Ski's on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. So to finish off today's show, Ski, sorry, I got to add to this. I'll do it in a bit, but I just wanted to show one thing on more of a personal note. So I filled out, for those of you who are on the Ethereum train, if you know what nouns are, I filled out for my curling club a sponsorship for nouns. And right now we just reached the 66 votes to pass to have nouns sponsor the curling club. And I can't wait till all the old people in the club and young people are like, what the hell's a noun? Like, why is this thing all over the ice and on the walls and stuff like that? So super big shout out to Brennan, Index Card, and Bixbyte, and so many more for helping me with the nouns sponsorship of the curling club. But super helpful, all of them. It's actually been a super fun process, and I can't wait to get the assets in there and get all the stuff in the ice in the house where all the scoring happens, and start taking videos for the nouns. So, we talked a lot about oblique stuff, but nouns, Disco and I have done shows with Brennan a couple of times and about nouns, but also about really one of the only DAOs that has organized itself. I used to write comedy for a DAO actually under Bankless, and it was fun. I did it for fun and just wrote jokes. It was called The Rug. And, but it was like, there was nobody in charge. It was like a chicken with their head cut off. Some of the people in charge didn't have a comedy background. So some of the stuff they picked to be first was like, it's all right. It wasn't that funny, but I will say, from a DAO standpoint, Nouns has really organized itself in these different groups and blocks. And I pitched the different kind of voting blocks for Nouns to get these votes. And DAOs aren't perfect. If you are running a plumbing company, you probably don't want it to be a DAO where nobody's in charge. But for on-chain stuff and for things that can be done in smart contracts to funnel to different people based on percentages, DAOs are a pretty cool solution. And when you have CCO, which CryptoPunk should be, which nouns are, it's pretty cool because if this passes, I can take my artist, take the font, grab some nouns, and I can do and say whatever I want. It's Creative Commons open, and it's for the world, and it's just for growth and for the sake of propagating the nouns culture more. So kind of a cool story to end.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So really quick,
Yep.
You don't have to be a holder to propose.
You don't know, and I'm not a holder.
Yeah, like I know it. I just think that was something that seeing the movie, like I thought that was really incredible. Like, so you have this DAO and everything, but anyone can come up with an idea and propose it and see it come to life. So congratulations, that's really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nifty, welcome to the show. We're going to go to the Ski God portion of the show, but he says in response to Ski God, hey, for Bitcoin sold in R6, it's only a loss if you sell. So obviously, so many of us holding bags. I know Ski God and I share a certain. Actually, all of us share that CCG, that thing, like that thing went up in flames fast. I don't think we're ever getting NFTs from the anime Bitcoin guy. Bosley, yes, I'm talking to you, buddy. But wishing you love too, but also cats and sats, but they're all down. Billy's down. They're all down, but I do think Runes will have the run, but let's talk about that in the next show. So Disco, you want to take us out? Ski God, you stay on. We'll basically introduce the new show, but keep the live stream going.
Yeah. So this show is always for entertainment purposes only. Don't consider anything to be financial advice. Be sure you do your own research. Be careful what you're reading. Make sure you're taking a critical lens and view of everything, and don't invest more than you can afford to lose. So be careful.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. With that, take care and stay on, everybody, on X Live for our interview, which I am super excited about with Ski God. Yeah. So take care, everybody. Until next time, or right now, whichever comes first.